Our next speaker is another one of our community speakers that chose to join us today. Seri Fernandez is a current sophomore at Columbia College Chicago studying ASL to English interpretation. She has committed herself to helping facilitate communication and understanding through her career path.
In her talk, Listening versus Hearing, she discusses the differences between solely hearing someone and truly listening to them.
Please welcome Seri Fernandez to the stage.
So, breaking down communication barriers, really big topic. So, thought about the 3 steps that you kind of need to be able to do that. So the first one is caring, so good, you all passed, you're here. Second one is listening, and the third one is just doing and trying it. So I wanted to focus on the second one, because you can't do the third one without the second one. So, what do you all think listening is? Do you think it's hearing a sound, or do you think it's understanding someone, communicating with them? Does it have anything to do with sound, really? We all know that listening is more than hearing in the term of what it really means. Because when we say, you're not listening to me, it doesn't mean that that person didn't hear what you said, probably, if we're speaking as people who can hear. It means that you're not understanding me, you're not communicating with me, you're not paying attention. So I want to look into what paying attention really looks like and my personal experience with that. So listening in the dictionary, though, is defined as giving attention to a sound. So yes and no, because not only do you have to give attention to someone who's talking to you or communicating with you, you have to really listen to them. You have to understand them and interact with them and make the effort to understand. And also, listening doesn't really have anything to do with sound. But before I go on, I just want to put it out there. I'm a student. I am currently studying interpreting at Columbia, like they said. I'm not in the deaf community or the hard of hearing community, but I just wanted to show you what I've learned. So, and how I've grown. So we'll start with where I was in high school. I went here a while ago, and when I graduated, I thought I was this master ASL awesome person because I knew this language for sure. So no, I had been teaching myself online and had never interacted with a member of the deaf community or hard of hearing community in my life. And don't like telling this part of the story because it doesn't paint a good picture of me, of how I started learning this language. But I think it's important because in order to listen and understand people, you have to understand what that is, and you get to grow from that because you have to learn how to listen. And, you know, when you're teaching yourself a language without interacting with anyone who speaks it or communicates in that way, you aren't listening to the people who need to be listened to. So I wanted to learn ASL because I thought it was this beautiful language and just something so cool. And you might all be thinking, yeah, of course. I just want to put it out there. It's just a language. And it is a language. ASL stands for American Sign Language. It is not English with your hands. It's its own language with its own linguistic capabilities, syntax, grammar. It's its own thing, I promise. So, but I really just thought it was this cool thing, and I was teaching myself, and the people that I was learning from were other hearing people like me who had also taught themselves online, which is, if you're ever learning a language, I know Duolingo is this cool thing now, but you're never going to be fluent or speak like a native speaker or user if you haven't communicated with a person who is one. There's no way. So I come in thinking I'm this big hotshot, signing all the time, I go to my college orientation. I'm nervous the whole time, but I'm really excited. And I walk into this room with the head of my department. His name's Peter Cook. He's an amazing storyteller. He's deaf. And we walk in. I had decided, without knowing, that it was a day mainly for transfer students who had known ASL before. Almost all of the other people in the room decided to test out of ASL 1, which was a meeting with the head of my department. So just for background, they know what they were doing. I thought I did. So I walk in, I sit down, and Peter gets up there, and he does his usual greeting, like, "Hi, I'm Peter Cook." And he's Simon, obviously. He's deaf and is not an oral speaker. And the interpreter kind of looks around the room, makes eye contact with me, and then looks at the back of the room and goes, "Does anybody need this interpreted?" And that's what interpreting is, really quick. So I'm looking around, no one's raising their hand, no one's saying anything. I couldn't tell, I still can't, I couldn't be able to tell you if it was because they were scared like me, or if they really did know what they were doing, or at least thought they knew what they were doing. But it started sinking in when I didn't understand his greeting. I didn't understand that he said, "Hello, my name is Peter Cook." And I thought I was this big hotshot that knew the language and could definitely test out. I could probably pass to ASL 3, I would be fine. So, no one's raising their hand. I know I can't get through this without it being interpreted. So, I raise my hand like this, and the interpreter can't really see me, and she's like, do you need it interpreted? I was like, "Yeah, I need it interpreted." And I didn't like speaking, I felt uncomfortable, obviously it clicked that I did not know how to use ASL properly. I was just alone, I felt so alone, and it clicked that I had not been listening. I could have taken anyone's advice who was like, learn from deaf people how to sign ASL, which is what I'm currently doing now, and I would not say that I'm anywhere near fluent. That takes a very long time. But if anything else, I know how to listen, and I know how to understand and communicate with people. So she looks at me, I finally raise my hand, she interprets it for me. I understand, it's fine. So interpreters are there to facilitate communication. Really, they're not performers, they're not some cool thing that you get to see at concerts. They're there to break down communication barriers. That's really all they're there for. Not to say that their job isn't hard or important at all. It so is. It's very difficult. Trust me. But there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm entering my 4th semester at Columbia College Chicago now, and wow, I've learned a lot. To start off, some of the best listeners I know are my deaf friends and deaf peers, because you have to look at someone, you have to make eye contact with someone while you're communicating with them in ASL or any sign language, because most of the grammar, sentence structure, important information is all conveyed through the face and body. Like if your eyebrows are up, it indicates a certain kind of question, like a yes or no question. If they're down, it could be a WH question, like what, who, where, etc. Your mouth moves in a certain way depending on what sign you're producing. So if you're producing the sign large, you have to make a CHA sound, so ch, but not sound, you just move your mouth that way. And it's so important that you look at them when you do that. And, you know, it's hard for ASL students to not just stare at someone's hands when they're signing, but to really listen to them, you have to see the emotions they're conveying, because if you're just looking at their hands, you're only getting half the message. So, another thing about listening is, to circle back, does it really have anything to do with sound? Just because a language is visual doesn't mean you can't listen to the person who's communicating with you. You have to. It's so important that you just sit there and you listen and you watch so that you can respond appropriately and have a feeling of mutual respect. So, for example, if your mom picks you up from school and you immediately get on your phone in the car and she goes, "How's your day?" And you go, "Fine." Do you think she felt listened to? Really? I mean, if you're not looking at her, if you're just looking at your phone, you can say, "Oh, yeah, I'm listening to you. You said this, that, and the other." No, you heard her. You're not listening to her. So it's the same with a visual language. You need to look at that person to really listen. Because you can hear when you're speaking what the other person is saying, but you're not listening to them. I was watching a lot of TED Talks to prepare for this because I've never done something like this before. And a deaf man named Stephen O'Keefe, I believe, said in his TED Talk that it amazes him how people who have the ability to hear don't use their ears. And that has stuck with me. It's been burned in my brain since I've heard it. It was crazy to hear someone explain it like that, because most people who can hear, or as the deaf community calls them, hearing people, they say that they're listening to you, but they're just hearing you. And all we want as people is to be listened to. If you're back to that circling to your mom example, so you probably don't remember how many times you've said, "Ah, just fine, nothing really happened, whatever," and then went right back on your phone or stayed on your phone. You don't remember, but I bet the conversations that you can remember in your life, you were looking at that person. You were engaged with that person. I'll just yell. You were engaged with that person. You were really looking at them. You were communicating, and you were both listening to each other. That's the kind of thing you remember, because you felt not just heard, understood, and listened to. It's so important. It's so important that we actually take the time to sit there and learn how to listen. So, back again, just to ask, what do we think listening really is? Is it hearing? Is it seeing? Understanding? Hope that I was able to enlighten you a bit about how listening really is different than just hearing someone. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Seri. Does anyone from the audience have any questions for her? Yes, sir, you?
So, Ms. Fernandez, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
But that said, when we talk about communication, there's one side which is listening, and there's another side trying to communicate either through language, speaking, signage, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts around communication being effective from the other side too?
So, from communication being effective from language speaking to signing?
The person trying to communicate something.
Okay. If you're trying to communicate something in any way, you really just have to, if two people who can hear are talking to each other, most of the time, you can get one of them to listen to the other person. If you are talking from a hearing person to a deaf person, there are a multitude of ways you can go about it. You can hire an interpreter. You can start writing things down. You can take classes and learn ASL, but it's a lot to just break that down and really listen between two parties if you don't make the effort to. So it's a lot of you going out of your way to make sure that you're hearing and listening to whoever you're talking to, or communicating with.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah?
With your experience in the deaf community, do you feel like in general, because of what you talked about, that they're better listeners?
Oh, 100%. Every single deaf person I know, I feel like they've never not listened to me, because all of my professors are deaf. Who teach me ASL, and I have never gone into a room with them and left feeling like I wasn't heard or listened to, because ASL is such a interesting form of language where not only do you have to look at that person, one of the cool linguistic things about it is that you ask a lot of questions. So they really will ask, are you sure you understand? Like, I want to make sure like we're on the same page. And that's also just props to my teachers. But a lot of it is just how linguistically complex the language is, and they're so much better listeners than most of my hearing friends.
Any final questions? Alrighty, thank you, Sarah.
There was a person.
I'm sorry. Last question, go ahead.
Hey, Justin. So one thing that you said that I thought was really interesting was about how you think that like the first step in communication is caring.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned how you like learned tried to teach about ASL all through high school, and it didn't like you didn't really get to when you communicate.
Yeah.
Do you think that you hear the right way?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I, again, don't love admitting that, but no, I was learning it for the wrong reasons. I was learning it because I thought it was cool and I wanted to interpret music, and I thought learning songs was cool, and it wasn't so that I could facilitate communication between two people that have a hard time, or two groups of people that have a really hard time communicating, and it can cause a lot of problems. So no, I really was not caring in the right way, and I'm very glad that what I am doing now is so vastly different from that. But yeah, no, it really started with me getting into the deaf community and learning, and then once I knew that I cared, I could really start like trying to listen. And then hopefully one day I will get to interpret.